Welcome to the next FinTech Hive Mind. This week we're going to be talking about events. Now, events have been around forever, but they play a critical role for both industry and go-to-market strategy. They provide current information for buyers, but they also provide neutral ground for vendors and buyers to come together and learn a little bit more about each other. We're coming hot off Money 2020, which is just wrapping up now. And next week, we've got another raft of fantastic events. So this week, our guest is the CEO of FinTech Week London. We've got Raf de Kemp. Raf, sorry, have I said your name right there to start off with? Is it
That's all
Raf or
right.
Rafe?
It's not a. It's rough. It's fine. It's not a name that's gracious for English speakers. So I'm okay with it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I suppose just to kick us off, could you tell us a little bit about FinTech Week London and how it all started and where it is now?
Of course, yeah, and thanks for having me. FinTech Week London started actually 4 years ago. We saw that there was something that was happening, which was London Fintech Week a few years before that, that kind of fizzled out. And me and some partners in the UK ecosystem, we thought, well, actually, London does need that moment where people from the fintech, banking, financial services industries can come together in person and meet. There is something to be said for the London ecosystem. I mean, London is one of the biggest fintech ecosystems in the world. So it definitely, according to us, needed something specifically from the community of fintechs to meet with banks, insurers, and other companies. And that's where the idea started. So 4 years ago, we started with a smaller type of event and different events organized throughout the week. I think one of the biggest changes is that we now really focus on our own conference, on the awards, and on our VIP dinner. And then from that, we build with partners on extra events during the week. I think when we started, we tried to do everything ourselves, which, as you know, isn't always the best idea. So we're working with a lot of partners now. And this year, we're doing it this week. The first 3 days are London Tech Weeks conference, so we're a fringe partner to that. FinTech Fringe is running with a lot of side events as well. We're actually collaborating with them and a lot of others on the industry party on Thursday. And then we have our own conference on Thursday, the 13th at the Park Plaza. We're going to bring together 1,000 people. There'll be two stages on different topics. Definitely a lot of emphasis on both the content on one side, but also enough opportunity for people to network, speak to each other, go to our partners and sponsors. So yeah, very excited about what's coming this week.
Great. And in terms of some of that content, I mean, the content is really the like the cornerstone of events, isn't it? That's really what brings people together. So, what have you used to shape the agenda this year? And is there kind of any kind of key principles that you use to do that from one year to the next?
Well, I think there's a few things we do when it comes to content. One is we want to make sure that we offer our audience the topics that they are most interested in and that are most relevant for this time period. So even though embedded finance and the future of finance, some of the more general topics are still coming back year after year because they're still very relevant for the industry. We also add new content every year or new topics. Like this year, we're going to delve deeper into AI, and a new one this year is customer centricity as well. We're working with FoundEver, which is one of our platinum partners. They're really focused on customer experience, user experience, and we see that that's becoming a big differentiator in the fintech industry as well, where your customer is now already used to having everything digital, everything instant, everything through all these challenger banks that started and through all these new fintech apps. So yeah, customer experience, customer centricity is definitely something we see growing in interest. So that's one part is looking at what's relevant. Two is getting some of the great speakers there, making sure that there's big names. I think a bit of a difference towards previous years where we had more panels. We're this year focusing a bit more on keynotes. We're doing that because, as you said, content is important, but there's definitely a big need for ample room for networking as well. So our two stages are going to stop 3 times during the day, both stages at the same time. So everybody's out of the room and has that chance to talk to each other, run into each other, obviously use the app to book meetings with each other. And then a third part is making sure your content represents the full community of fintech. So diversity and inclusion is something that's very important to us. We've always worked on having at least as many, if not more, women than men on stage, supporting people of color, people from different backgrounds. We're working with Joe Dewar, ex-Thread, who's currently running Project Nemo on inclusion of people with a disability. So yeah, I think diverse content, high quality, top speakers, and making sure there's room for everything else next to your content as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, an agenda like that must take ages. When do you start planning an event like this? And do you sleep?
Most of well, unfortunately, this is also on camera, so you can see the bags under my eyes. But at some point, you have to go to sleep. But we mostly start planning actually on the event itself. There's a lot of people that come to me and people of the team and say, "Oh, I love this. I want to be part of it next year." So we start quite early. Officially, our call for speakers usually goes live around September, October, and it runs until the end of January. That's for all the editorial speakers because we're saving, let's say, 40% of the speaking slots for our sponsors, because we do understand if you're sponsoring, if you're spending money, then you want to be on stage. However, everybody that goes on stage has to go through the same process, has to be approved by the content board. The content has to not be commercial, has to be inspiring, and the speaker has to fit into, like I said, our diversity goals as well. So yeah, even though you're sponsoring, you're not guaranteed a specific speaker on stage, but you are guaranteed some time that we can fill together. And I think that's one of the ways we make sure all our content is high quality to get everybody to adhere to the same rules, to make sure that whoever is on stage is the best person for the job.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's acknowledged that there's a huge amount of effort and cost that goes into putting on events like this. But there's it's almost hush hush that how it's paid for, the commercial model. Could you just tell us a little bit about? I mean, obviously there's a ticket to get in, and you just talked about sponsors. Kind of, how do you pay for this? How is that broadly split down? If you're happy to say.
Of course, I think everybody who works with me knows I'm quite transparent, and I think might be also my more European heritage, where I'm quite direct and not so hush hush. So yeah, I often say when I'm talking to people, especially when it's about sponsorships, everybody wants to be on stage, everybody wants to have that room where they can meet their peers, but people have to pay for it. I mean, it's not charity. We don't get everything for free, unfortunately, from our own suppliers. So there is a bill, and to pay that bill, there's two revenue streams, like you said. One is ticketing. That's about 30 to 40% of our revenue. We try to keep the tickets at a reasonable price. Obviously, there is, like I said, everybody who joins, they'll get breakfast, they'll get lunch, there's rooms there, there's water there, all of that has to be paid for. So there is a ticket price. And on the other side, we work with sponsors, or I prefer to call them partners, because it really is a two-way street. You really have to make sure that you are very clear on what the goals of your sponsors are and how you're going to make sure that they get that return on investment. So in terms of sponsorships, that's about 60% of our revenue.
Great. And I think I'd love to hear your opinion on how sponsors can maximize this, because this podcast is kind of predominantly around scaling fintechs. And yeah, I think there are some fantastic examples of terrible events, where you have this, 20-something-year-old standing next to a pop-up banner, in an ill-fitting suit, hoping people will come and speak to them. What advice would you give to anyone, whether it's your event or others, about how they can really maximize that kind of attendance or that sponsorship?
Mm-hmm. I think first and foremost, the most important thing is know the goal or the goals why you are attending an event. Did you just go through a rebranding, and is it more on brand awareness? Or are you trying to get some of your C-levels more visibility? Is it thought leadership and building their brand? Is it trying to find partners because you're a young startup and you're trying to find other companies to work with and then together get your proposal into the market? Or are you established and are you trying to sell? And who are you trying to sell to? Are you trying to sell to banks, or are you trying to sell to other fintechs, or all of the above? So I think making sure that your goals are clear and that you communicate these goals with the event is one of the main recipes for success. And I think when you're looking at events based on those goals, you're going to have to look at, do I want a very specific event, a very niche event, because I'm only looking for asset managers or risk and compliance officers? Or am I looking to make a big splash in the industry, and am I looking at bigger events like a FinTech Week London, where it's we have about 70% decision makers from across the board in the financial services industry? Or are you even a step bigger, and are you going to the likes of a Money 2020, where you're saying, listen, I'm bringing a whole team, and then you have that 20-year-old there, but you also have people with experience next to them to make sure that there's like a first level of conversations, and you then direct people towards either partnerships or leads or whatever. So I think, yeah, thinking about your goals and then deciding which specific event you're going to work with is very important, because like you said, there's a lot of events, and every event serves a different purpose. I think our purpose is mostly on bringing people together, one on brand awareness, two on thought leadership, and three on procuring partnerships. So if that's something you're interested in, then our event is something for you. But on the other hand, there's other events that focus on different tactics as well.
I think one of my favourite points there is the suggestion that the vendors come to you and just be transparent about what they're looking to achieve, rather than just trying to buy a package off the shelf and take care of it, so you can collaborate with them on the best way to help them achieve those objectives.
Yeah, I think the biggest reason why people are unhappy with their return on investment is because they weren't very clear about which return they were expecting. Now, sometimes that's just because they didn't know, or top down afterwards, there's questions being asked that weren't asked in advance. But that's really the reason why we call it partnerships, is because we're going to try and see what we can do to reach those goals. And if you are very transparent about what you want out of it, I mean, if you want a bit of everything, that's quite easy. I mean, then we're going to check a lot of boxes, and it will be fine. But if you're very specifically looking for 5 curated meetings with banks, you'd better say that so we can help you in advance. Then afterwards going, well, we only had one meeting with a bank. On the other hand, I also often have to tell people it's not really the quantity that matters. I mean, it's great if you go home with 100 leads that you can then run through your marketing machine, and maybe something will come out of it. But I recently had a conversation with someone who came to our event. Actually, she had a free ticket through one of our partners. And she said, well, I met a company there, and we were starting to build a sort of KYC process and engine all ourselves. I met a company there that was doing exactly that. We had some conversations, and now they are our partner, and they run all our identity control just purely because they met him at an event. Now, that's something that's more valuable, both for that attendee, but also for that company that was a sponsor at that point, than having 100 leads. I mean, it's one concrete client that turns into a project. And if it's a project that's big enough, I mean, if your sponsorship is under 10% of what that project is, you could say it's a success, even though it's only one project that you get out of it.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories, I think a lot of the time, the problem with how vendors view the ROI of events is that they expect to kind of walk away with a big bag full of leads. They've got a very short-term view of it. And one of my favorite stories was, this happened to me about 10 years ago. I was presenting to the COO of a tier 1 bank, and he got up in the middle of the meeting and he drew a slide that the CEO had had presented at an event, a thought leadership presentation 5 years earlier. So we'd had nothing in that time, but there can be a long tail for kind of seeding that brand.
Especially if you're working in fintech financial services, customer acquisition processes are quite long. So yeah, for sure. I think what you're saying there is 100%. I mean, it can take quite a while, but if it's the right size for you, it's the right project that you're doing, then there's no reason why not to be happy with that as a return.
Yeah, and that's why I think the fact that it's a neutral ground, events provide a neutral territory for people just to have exploratory conversations without pressure. I think that's good for
Yeah, for
both
sure.
sides. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I agree. That's a main reason why we work with a lot of companies, not only on events like FinTech Week London, but for instance on smaller events like VIP dinners. We're kind of a neutral party in the middle, bringing people together. You have a reason to be there, and we try to curate as much as we can who's attending. But definitely having a neutral place to be, meet, see if it works or works not. I mean, since last year, we were also doing speed networking, which is exactly this. We put people together at a table. They get about 3 minutes just to kind of see, test the waters and see, is this interesting to me? Do we have a common goal here? Is there something we can do for each other? Yes or no? And it's easy to then say, no, you both go away and you meet other people. There's no problem. Yes, you set up a follow-up meeting and then you go into it. So yeah, I think having events where people can explore who they need to talk to when they're back at the office is a great thing.
And have events changed since COVID? Because we went through, it feels so long ago, doesn't it now? It feels almost surreal. But we went through this period where everything had to go online and it went digital. Has it gone back to how it was pre-COVID? Or have events emerged as some sort of digital, physical hybrid more? What's your take?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we are a quite good example of how COVID can impact events because we had our idea of our event right before COVID, started planning it, and then COVID hit. So we had to completely redesign. We were the first event in FinTech in London after the restrictions were almost lifted, but there still were some. So we had a hybrid event with a virtual day with people in the room, but social distancing, masks, etc. So yeah, I think COVID has impacted events in different stages. I think during COVID, everything went fully virtual, and that lasted for a while, and people were very happy because they could watch a webinar or get through content whenever they wanted, or they could do quick meetings without losing time to go in place. I think right before COVID, there was a sort of event fatigue. There was too many people going out, and people started realizing, listen, I can't spend 20, 30, 60% of my time out of the office because my work doesn't get done. COVID then allowed people to get their work done, so that was good. And I do think that right out of COVID, people were again realizing sitting behind the screen, looking at someone, talking to someone, you do miss some sort of personal connection, and you don't have that serendipity, you don't have anything that goes beyond your quick introduction, your hello, and your meeting. So I think people were very hungry coming out of COVID to go back and in person, and I think that kind of leveled out now. I think 2022 was a booming year for the event industry. Everybody wanted to be everywhere all of the time. I think now it's normalizing a little bit, and definitely there is an impact of COVID. I think for us, we decided to make sure that we offer that value by doing everything in person. I think there's other companies that went different ways, and I think each has their value. But for us, COVID meant, well, big impact on our first event because we had to redesign the whole thing 6 months out. But then for now, I think for us it illustrated that we have to offer quality time for people to meet, quality people to meet each other, and quality content, and that's what we're doing. Really believe that in-person meeting offers much more than virtual meetings, so that's why we're fully going that route.
Yeah, I think your choice of the word serendipity is perfect.
Yeah, and it happens, and sometimes you have to force it a little bit, right? It's not fully fate that's happening there. I mean, it's because it's the right people at the right location at the right time. And you do have everything that you can do in advance, planning your meetings, making sure you know who's there, making sure you have something in the calendar. But yeah, nothing is more fun than running into someone at a conference and all of a sudden going, oh, wait, you might be exactly the person I was looking for. So let's talk some more, maybe get some drinks in the evening at the after party, and then see if we can do business.
You mentioned the app as well. I think that's definitely something that happened post COVID. I know apps existed for events before that, but I think that really made them table stakes in terms of adoption. I think I remember as a sponsor before, you'd ask for the list of attendees and then you'd kind of start reaching out to them in
Mm-hmm.
advance on LinkedIn. And now you have the app, you can do a lot of that all in app. So
Yeah.
what technology do you use?
We actually use Cvent as a platform. It's one of the biggest player in the event industries, and it's a platform that we use for everything end to end. So our website is built on it. Our tickets and registration is built on it, and our app is actually a white label version of their app. So we have our own FinTech Week London app that allows for people to. It just launched actually last week. So it allows people 2 weeks in advance to go through the attendee list to start looking at who they want to meet and potentially even set up some meetings. We do have it in a mobile app version and in a browser version as well. So what we see is a lot of the people, especially also like you mentioned, sponsors, they'll go into the desktop version first. They'll start planning everything out, and then at the event itself, you see that the mobile app takes over, and that's where people not only find each other to meet, but also find their way of where they have to go, see which sessions they want to attend. So yeah, I think it's a powerful tool both for the attendees, but also for event organizers where you can send notifications, direct traffic a little bit. And definitely since COVID, they have risen in terms of just how many people are using them, comfortable using them, and I think it's also an efficiency thing, right? If you're in the event app, you know you're talking to the exact right people, and it saves you from going through another system. You can automatically book a meeting with them at the location. So yeah, I agree. Apps for events are definitely here to stay, and there's a lot of value in them for every party involved.
And in terms of your attendance at the event, do you get to enjoy any of the keynotes, or are you just kind of stressing backstage, preparing to run everything and keep a tight ship?
I apply the duck theory. I look very calm on the surface, but there is a lot of things going on under the water for sure. I obviously I'm very lucky to have a great team supporting me, and there's a lot of things that are happening at the same time. So do I enjoy it? I enjoy certain moments of it, right? I think 2 years ago I interviewed the then mayor of Chicago on stage. That was a keynote or an interview I really enjoyed because I was actually part of it on the stage as well. And every now and then I do get the time to stand in the back of the room and hear something and go, wow, that's actually really cool. So yeah, I do get to enjoy some of it, but a lot of it is running around, talking to people, talking to the partners, and every now and then putting out a little fire. So everything keeps running on track. So it's a mix of enjoyment and animation, let's say.
I can imagine. And of all of the attendees, you said there were going to be 1,000 people there this year. How is that audience split roughly between bank or buyer side and
Mhm.
suppliers?
So we have about 40% of fintech and technology companies. 30% is the traditional banking, insurance, so let's say the incumbents. And the rest is filled up with either some people from professional services, some VC people, people from the government, dignitaries. So even though it's called FinTech Week London, it's actually a very good mix of everybody in the financial services ecosystem. And I think that's also part of the value there is you don't want to start shouting into an echo chamber. I mean, if it's only fintechs talking to fintechs, sometimes that can work because they're trying to learn how to scale or how to grow, or they're specifically looking for partnerships. But for our type of event, we need both parties. Both parties, all the parties in the room, let's say.
Yeah, and you've just said something there that I think is really important, which is the representation from venture capital and other investment. It's a huge part of the events community that they're going out and I suppose searching for worthy investments, and I think that's one of the main things that events provide, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it depends on your type of attendees and your type of companies that are there, right? I mean, there's events specifically for funding and looking at venture capital, and I do think if your main goal of the event is to pulling more funding, you'd have to focus on an event that is really focused on venture capitalists, because venture capitalists don't leave their room unless they're 100% sure that that it's going to be worth their time, right? I mean, they the market is that big, there's that much demand for their money basically, that they don't leave the room unless it's really worth it for them. So I think for us it's part of the ecosystem, because it's we get most of the VC people that are just looking around on the market, seeing how is every company doing, getting inspired by the content and what direction the industry is going. But I think if you want to set up an event where it's really around funding, that should be your only focus, and that's a very different type of event that is not open to the public, that is very high level, very quick meetings. All those meetings have to be curated. I mean, I've been part of these types of events in the past, and we might do a few of them in the future. But yeah, they're a different crowd, the VCs. But we do get them on the floor. But I don't think they come with their checkbook ready. I think they come to be inspired.
Well, I have to say, I'm really looking forward to the event, particularly the nature of AI. Like for me, I think AI holds so much promise, but it's a really, really tricky subject. And I think you've got a few interesting speeches around this. So I'm looking forward to the event. Raf, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait till next week.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I'll was very kind of kind of you having me here, and looking forward to seeing you on the event floor. And you'll see if at that time I'm either putting out a fire or enjoying myself.
Sounds good. Thanks, Raf.
Thanks, James.